Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohammed Fuad, an expert member of the UI GreenMetric. Allow me to convey my gratitude from afar to the Director, Professor Mustafa Shufali, for allowing me to participate in the National Workshop on UI GreenMetric for Turkish universities. Today, I'll pass through a video presentation. What I'd like to do is to present the criteria of UI GreenMetric and the online data submission process. As those of you who are already familiar know, there are 39 criteria of UI GreenMetric that are organized into 6 categories. I'd like to go through them so that those of you who are not yet familiar may have an overview of them. I need, however, to ask the patience of those of you who are already familiar, because you will hear some of the things you already know. I also would like to think that my presentation would remind you of or encourage you to rethink some of your understanding of the UI GreenMetric criteria. These are the 6 categories. The first one is setting and infrastructure, which has 15% of the total points. The second is energy and climate change, which has 21% of the total points. The third is waste, which has 18% of the total points. The fourth is water, which has 10% of the total points. The fifth is transportation, which has 18% of the total points. And the sixth, or the last, is education and research, which has 18% of the total points. Category 1, setting and infrastructure, has 6 criteria. The keywords in this category are area and space, open, vegetation, water, and budget. The most important one, however, is open. As criteria number 1 shows, you need to leave 95% or more of your campus ground open. This is criterion 1 of setting an infrastructure. That, of course, is the requirement for the highest score in this criterion. As you might see, each criterion of UI GreenMetric has 5 levels of achievement. The lowest achievement has the lowest score, which is 0. The second level achievement has 25% of the score. The third level achievement has 50% of the score. And the fourth level achievement has 75% of the score. And the highest achievement has 100% of the score. The openness of your campus is measured in terms of several criteria. The first one is your campus population. In terms of this criterion, you need to have 70 square meters or more for each individual on your campus. This is criterion 5. Criterion 5, 70 square meters or more for each individual on your campus. The next criterion is vegetation, which is of 2 kinds, forest and planted. For forest vegetation, you need to set aside 35% of your campus ground. This is criteria number 2, 35% of your campus ground. And for the planted vegetation, you need to set aside 40% of your campus ground. This is criterion 3, 40% of your campus ground. Combined, both criteria require 75% of your campus ground set aside for both of them. The next criterion is water absorption, which requires that you set aside 30% of your campus ground for it. This is criterion number 4 for setting an infrastructure. The last criterion in the first category of setting an infrastructure is budget, which requires that you set aside 12% of your university budget allocated for sustainability efforts. So this is criteria 6 for energy, for setting an energy. The criteria I pointed above are, of course, for the highest scores. Category 2, energy and climate change, has 8 criteria. The keywords in this category are source, production, usage, efficiency, and policy. For source, the criterion requires that you have 3 or more renewable sources for the energy on your campus. This is criterion 3. 3 sources or more of renewable energy on your campus. For production, the criterion requires that you have 25% or more of energy usage on your campus coming from renewable energy production. This is criterion number 5. 25% or more of the usage of energy on your campus coming from renewable energy production. For energy usage, you have several criteria. The first one is population. In terms of this criteria, you need to have 279 kilowatt hours or less of energy usage per person. This is criterion number 4, 279 kilowatt hours or less of energy usage per person. For efficiency, it is measured in terms of several criteria: usage of efficient appliances, smart building implementation, and green building policy. For usage of appliances, it is required that 75% of the appliances used on your campus is energy efficient. This is criteria number 1. 75% of the appliances used on your campus is energy efficient. For smart building implementation, it is required that this is for the highest score. Your university carries on smart building implementation to the extent that 75% or more of the buildings on your campus are smart. This is criteria number 2 for energy and climate change. For green building policy, it is required that your university carries on 3 elements of green building implementation. This is criterion 6. That is 3 elements of green building implementation. The next criterion for efficiency is emission, which is of 2 kinds: greenhouse and carbon footprint. For greenhouse emission, it is required that your campus has a reduction program covering 3 scopes of emission. This is criteria number 7. 3 scopes of emission. For carbon footprint, it is required that relative to population, the volume needs to be 0.10 metric tons or less. This is criteria number 8. So those are the criteria for category 2, energy and climate change. Category 3, waste, has 6 criteria. The keywords in this category are recycling, reduction, and treatment. For recycling, it is required that 75% or more of your waste is recycled. This is criteria number 1. 75% or more of your waste is recycled. For reduction, the requirement is that you have 3 or more programs of paper and plastic reduction. This is criterion 2 of waste. More than 3 programs of reduction of paper and plastic use. For treatment, the requirement is that it should include 3 kinds of waste: organic, inorganic, and toxic, and your sewage disposal. For organic waste, it is required that you treat 75% or more of it. This is criteria number 3. 75% or more of your organic waste treated. For inorganic waste, it is required that you treat also 75% or more of it. This is criteria number 4. Criterion 4, for inorganic waste, that you treat 75% or more of it. For toxic waste, it is also required that you treat 75% or more of it, and that is criterion 5. For sewage disposal, the requirement is that you treat it for upcycling, and that is criteria number 6. So those are the criteria for category 3, waste. The next category is water, category 4. It has 4 criteria. The keywords in this category are conservation, recycling, efficiency, and treatment. For conservation, the requirement is that your campus needs to conserve 50% or more of its water. This is criterion number 1, the criterion 1 for water, 50% of the water on your campus conserved. For recycling, the requirement is that your campus needs to recycle 50% or more of its water. This is criteria number 2, 50% or more of your water recycled. And for efficiency, the requirement is that 50% or more of the appliances used on your campus need to be water efficient. This is criterion 3. And for treatment, the requirement is that 75% of the water consumed on your campus needs to be treated water. This is requirement 4. 75% of the water consumed on your campus needs to be treated water. And the next category, the 5th, transportation, has 8 criteria. The keywords in this category are number of motor vehicles, reduction of private vehicles, collective transportation, zero emission, parking, and pedestrian path. For the number of motor vehicles, the requirement is that the total needs to be 0.045 or less. That is 45 vehicles or less for every 1,000 of the population. This is criterion 1 for transportation. 45 vehicles or less for every 1,000 of the population on your campus. For the reduction of private vehicles, the requirement is that your campus needs to have 3 or more reduction programs. This is criterion 7 for transportation, 3 initiatives or more of reduction of private vehicles. For collective transportation, the requirement is that your campus needs to provide shuttle service that is regular and free, and that is criterion 2. Your campus provides shuttle service that is regular and free. And for zero emission vehicles, the requirement includes two things. One is that your campus provides free zero emission vehicles, and that is criterion 3. Free zero emission vehicles provided for the campus. And 2 is that the number of zero emission vehicles on your campus is 2 or more for every 100 population. That is criterion 4. Two vehicles, 2 zero emission vehicles for every 100 or more of the population. For parking, it is measured in terms of two things: your total campus area and reduction program. The requirement for parking area is that it needs to be 1% or less of the total area of your campus, and that is criterion 5, 1% or less of your campus ground assigned for parking. And for reduction program, it needs to result in 30% or more decrease in parking area on your campus, and that is criterion 6. It needs to aim at decreasing the parking area 30%. And next, for pedestrian path, the requirement is that your campus needs to provide one that is not only convenient but also disabled free, and that is criterion 8, or the last criterion. On campuses around the world, provision of pedestrian path is common, but provision of not only convenient but also disabled friendly pedestrian path could be a challenge. And the last category, category 6, education and research, has 7 criteria. The keywords in this category are education, research, and report. For education, you can think of it in terms of 2 kinds: class and non-class. For class education, the requirement is that you need to have 20% or more of the courses in the curriculum dedicated to sustainability issues, and that is criterion 1 for education and research. 20% of the curriculum needs to be consisted of 20%. I mean, the criterion is that 20% of the courses in your curriculum needs to be dedicated to sustainability efforts. And for non-class education, it is measured in terms of 2 things: events and organization. For the events, it is required that your campus needs to hold 47 or more events every year, and that is criterion number 4, 47 events or more per year dedicated to sustainability issues. For organization, it refers to student organizations that are active in promoting sustainability efforts. The requirement is that you need to have 10% or more student organizations dedicated to sustainability issues, and that is criteria number 5. 10 or more student organizations dedicated to sustainability issues. For research, 2 things are seen as relevant. One is publication, and the other one is funding. For publication, the requirement is that your university needs to have 300 or more scholarly publications per year on sustainability, and that is criteria 3, 300 or more scholarly publications on sustainability. As for funding, the requirement is that you allocate 40% of your university research funding for sustainability issues. That is criterion 2 for education, 40% of your university research funding allocated for sustainability issues. For report, it is seen in terms of two forms, document and website. The requirement for both is the same. That is, they are available, accessible, and updated. So those two criteria are criteria 6, website run by university, and criterion 7, sustainability report. Again, the requirement is the same, and that is that they need to be available, accessible, and updated regularly. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the 39 criteria and 6 categories of the UI GreenMetric. I hope my presentation gives a clear idea of what those criteria and categories are. It might have seemed that in my presentation I have emphasized the importance of achieving the highest scores and the highest ranking. In fact, that is not the case, because the most important idea in the UI GreenMetric is not achieving the highest ranking, but realizing your own potentials. In other words, the most important idea is not achieving the highest scores, but to be your best through your own efforts and practices that will take you there. Now, I'd like to move on to the online data submission process. The online data submission process is one in which you answer the UI GreenMetric online questionnaire by submitting data about your university and activities related to sustainability efforts on your campus. This is the dashboard page that you will see after you log in to the UI GreenMetric website. This dashboard contains some important notes. The first one is that the first one tells you that you don't have to go at one go in completing the questionnaire. It is possible to save a partially completed survey on the website as you may gather the data in stages. If you have not acquired the data, you can temporarily put 0 and save them as draft. This input data can be edited when you revisit the system before the final data submission. In other words, you can stop at any time during the process of your filling in the data, and then you can save it as draft, and then you can come back anytime you want and begin again from where you have stopped. The second note that I'd like to point out is the format of the evidence that you need to provide for some of your answers. Some of the questions in the questionnaire requires that you provide evidence. So the evidence that you provide needs to be in the format of words or PDF. If you use Word format, you can use the older version or the newer version. The older version .doc or the newer version .docx. And another thing about your evidence is that the size should be less than 2 megabytes. And another note that I'd like to point out here is about the data that you submit. This is the note, the second before last. It says, please submit the latest yearly annual data that you have according to your 12 months data gathering schedule. That is the data that you have at the end of the 12 months of your data collection process. Okay, so that is the first page of before you go to the questionnaire. That consists of some important notes. The next page that you need to pay attention to is the profile pages. This is the profile pages. The profile pages ask you to fill in the data about your university. Please note that some of the data are mandatory, that is, that you must provide them, but some are optional. So you need to fill in the data about the name of your university, the name of your rector, etc. Some of the data that you must provide is the person in charge. Here, this is the person in charge for Green Campus information. So the person that is responsible for filling in the questionnaire. You need to fill in the name of the person, the position of the person, email of the person, and then you also provide the address for your sustainability website. And after you finish with your profile pages, please don't forget to save it, to save the data that you have filled in. And this page gives you an option to whether you want to use a smaller text or larger text for your data submission process. Now, after that, the next page brings you to the first page of the questionnaire. What you see on this page are the buttons with which you can choose the category you want to begin with. In other words, you don't have to do your submission process in order. You can start from any of the 6 categories. So what you need to do is choose one of them. So and you click the button of the category that you choose. And another thing that you need to pay attention to is that at the end of every question, you have a question mark here. And if you click the question mark, there will be a pop-up help if you need more information about the question. And if you click the question mark, then there will be a short explanation about the question. Now this page shows some buttons. There are 4 buttons here. The first one here is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let me point out to you that the questions in the UI GreenMetric questionnaire consists of 2 kinds of questions. The first one is multiple choice question, and the other one is a question that requires you to fill in some data. Now, this is an example of the multiple choice question 1.4. So what you need to do is click one of the circles here. But the other kind of question is that you need to fill in some data here. Now, in the case of the question that requires you to fill in some data, they mostly require you to provide data, to provide you with evidence. that is when you need these 4 buttons. So this is the button that you need to click when you want to upload your evidence. And then the next button is the button that you need to click when you want to have a look at, you want to see how the evidence that you have uploaded look like. So you click this button and you'll see how it looks. And if you want to change, or you want your evidence, then you can click this button to download the evidence that you have uploaded. And then the next button here is for evidence template. The evidence that you provide needs to conform to the template. So this is the button that will lead you to the template. If you click this button, this is what will show up. This is the template for evidence. Now, to use this template for your evidence, there are some changes that you need to make. First is that you need to put your university's logo here. And then you need to fill the data of your university's name, country, and web address. And then you also need to delete this mark. And then you need, of course, to put in your data by replacing the data that are in the sample. Another thing that you need to do is to add a link for the evidence that you upload in the case where your evidence is somewhere in the internet. So what you need to do is to put in the link to your evidence. Now the evidence that you provide could be in pictures, graphs, tables, or data. Another thing that you also are required to give is a short description of the data that you provide. And this is where you need to give you need to place your description. The description needs to be short but clear. And of course, your description of the evidence should be in English. This is the summary of the things that I have just pointed out. That some of the questions require evidence, in which case evidence is mandatory, and if you fail to provide evidence may result in a declined score. And all evidence that you provide need to comply with the template provided. And evidence could be in pictures, graphs, tables, or data. You need to provide description, short but clear in English, and the maximum size for each evidence you provide is 2 megabytes. Now the last thing here is a note which says that you agree to provide UI GreenMetric rights to use your data and picture as best practices, example, and informational purposes. And this page, in this page you have the person who is doing the data submission process has 3 choices. There are 3 buttons that he or she can choose. The one is print draft answer button, 2 is save as draft button, and the 3rd is submit button. You might need, the person in charge might need this print draft answer when she or he needs to print all the data that he has or she has submitted. For example, if she needs to show it to her superior in order to get approval, for example, then she can print the data, and in order to do that, she can click this button. And this Save as Draft button is for you when you want to save the data that you have submitted as draft. For example, you want to stop in the middle and then, planning to continue later. So when you want to stop, you can click this button, saving the data that you have submitted as draft. And then when you come back later, you can begin again from where you left off. And then the last button here, Submit, you click it when you are ready to submit. And once you click the button, this dialog box will appear, and you'll be asked if you are sure to submit. When you are, then you click this OK button. So that is the process of online questionnaire answer, and once you try it, I think you'll find it not so very complicated. Ladies and gentlemen, that is basically the end of my presentation about UI GreenMetric criteria and categories and the online data submission. But before I finish, I'd like to show you some examples of smart building implementation. The slides that I have, or this slide shows an example of automation for building management system. And this is an example of safety, intruder alarm system, another example of safety for firefighter, another example of safety for video surveillance, and this is an example of energy monitoring, energy management, water monitoring, water recovery, indoor environment for thermal comfort, indoor environment for air quality, indoor environment real time, indoor environment for passive system. And these are examples of lighting, the use of LEDs, lighting for sensors, lighting for shielding, and lighting for natural light. So those are some examples of implementation of smart building components that I have. And the next slide that I have here shows you, for those of you who are not yet familiar and you want to try the online questionnaire, you can use this demo version of the UI GreenMetric questionnaire. If you go to the UI GreenMetric website, you'll see some buttons, and one of them is demo. If you click the demo button, then you'll see this page here. And the UI GreenMetric provides 20 usernames, uigm.demo10 to uigm.demo30, and one password, uigm123, that can be used with all those usernames. Now, if you try this demo and play around some, you'll get a feel of of the process of data submission process online. Now this is the timeline for 2019 for data submission. The date here, 20th of May to 30th of October, is the time for data submission, and so this is you still more or less 1 month to finish your submission. And then November, the first 3 weeks of November is for validation, and then December is for the announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my presentation. I hope that can be a help to you all, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.